although my child I've got my COVID Marshall on mute for sure.
Take that very seriously.
It took me 10 minutes to complete.
To do all the training. Is it one of those ones if you get something where you can go back and redo it? That's bad.
Alright, how are we going, Chloe? Is it happening?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's doing it.
Welcome everyone to the mill, and thank you for coming along today for Carolyn's Artist Talk. We are stoked to have you here.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that we are gathering here today on Kaurna land and acknowledge the Kaurna people's relationship to country. This land is unceded and it always was and always will be Kaurna land. We are going to have a nice little chat. I prepared some questions so Carolyn knows what's coming. And then at the end we can open that out to you. But I think because it's a small group, things will be pretty intimate. We also obviously have the live stream happening. So thanks to our funding body, Arts South Australia, and also thanks to the Banker Save Foundation for supporting this aspect of what we're doing here today. Now, I know a few of you obviously have been to the mill before, but a few of you maybe haven't been to the mill before. We're a multi-arts organisation, so we do visual arts out here, but we also have a performing arts space, the Breakout, which is where our Fringe season is all happening this year, which kicked off on Friday night. And this space is at the box office for that as well. So make sure you check out the What's On page on our website as well if you're interested in seeing some of the cool shows that are happening here. I'm going to jump straight in. Carolyn is an emerging multidisciplinary artist and a graduate from Adelaide Central School of Art. And within this project called Random Acts of Obsession, the artist as collector, she has collected discarded domestic objects and ephemeral natural objects to use as sites for material investigation. So we're going to have a chat about a few of the themes, pull out some strings and chat about process and materiality. But I always like to start with hearing a little bit about the artist and how you came to be an artist. I know that you were you had another career before this point, so talk a little bit about maybe your first experiences of being an artist, maybe as a child, and then how you came back to it after your other career.
Right. When I finished high school, I did apply for and I was accepted to start art school and really excited to go, but then situations occurred and circumstances meant that I had to go to uni and had a career as a lawyer for over a decade, so an unfortunate diversion because law is not particularly creative and I'd always had that pull. So when I had children and they were ready to attend school, then I began working as a garden designer, so which I still do. And when the opportunity came up to then attend art school, I jumped in and haven't sort of stopped running since then. So I was really enjoying the process because I've probably always been a maker. As a child, I was a big maker and always did a myriad of creative pursuits, and that's probably why I've got so many sort of skills to put towards my work now. But the pull of art is strong, and I find that it's not only something that adds a spark and excitement to my life, but with the work that I do, there's a meditative sort of process that happens as well, so that really enhances my life. So
it's really interesting to hear you talk about garden design as being part of that creative impulse as well, and and how strongly that relates to the materials that you
sure
use in your practice. Yeah, it's great. Let me see. So in your artist statement, you said that the selection of an object is worthy of the collection is rooted in memory and biography. The fixation becomes physical with the need to hunt, to store, sometimes display, and inevitably, for me, the need to make something. I thought that would be a nice starting off point for you to talk a little bit about your process, how you come to find each of the objects that make their way into your collection, and I thought maybe if you could pick a couple of works to speak to. But yeah.
Okay, well basically my art practice is my emotional reaction to the landscape as I move through it, my environment and the things that I collect as I go along. The things that I'm attracted to that speak to me are usually, as you said, something to do with a memory or a feeling of identity with that object. So, and all objects have an agency that, you know, that might attract me or provide a connection with something that I want to say. So, if I collect something and I take it back to my studio, I try and work out, sometimes it's not related when I bring it back. It needed to be in that space. So, but other things that speak louder, I bring them back and I try and figure out what the connection was and what it was bringing to me. And then I'll use different materials and process to try and highlight that. So I do really enjoy putting very disparate materials and processes together to try and heighten that, what I feel the object brings to me. So that's kind of like the process. And in this particular exhibition, so for instance, the piece at the front is called the 23rd Century Collector. And it's basically a Wunderkammer, and I don't know if you know Wunderkammers, but they're collections that of valued or notable objects that started in the 16th century. They call it a Wunderkammer, but a lot of them were rooms, and they were mainly about probably a lot to do with power and control, because they were around colonial travel and what they brought back to express their status. So I kind of went with that idea, and because I'm a bit of a science fiction fan, so I projected that into the future, what may happen when in the future when these mundane objects that we see every day become things that were no longer around. So it's a piece of regret and loss, really. So I'd collect objects that I thought may have this end, that they will disappear, and mainly they were broken or discarded, and I'd heighten the idea that they were precious by fixing them or rehabilitating them with gold leaf, or sew them together, or just something to heighten that feeling that they're precious. And made my own Wunderkammer, and obviously a mirror is always something that helps to reflect on our feelings of what's going on, and so that's how that came about.
So what are some of the objects there? There's bees.
There's a bee is the centre of the mirror, because we do have a current situation with bees.
And orchids?
Orchids, flowers, plant material, and there's a tooth in there, a human tooth, so who knows?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and And this one is speaking a lot about obsession and the process that is involved. So it began when in January 2020 I wanted to put in an application for the Parklands Prize. So I thought what I'd do is I'd walk through a park, one park a day for 29 days, because there's 29 parks in the Parklands, and pick up a little leaf or a twig or something that spoke to me and bring it back to the studio. And I thought that as the little object was kind of a memento, it was like a vessel of something that had connected with me, that I would make little vessels to put them in. So I produced these 1-inch wheel thrown pots. So I've got my little potter's wheel. So don't need much space for that, that's good. And I've put my item in it, and then so at the end of the process, that was a month, and so that shelf is a finalist in the Parklands Prize, which because of 2020 is still coming up next month. But I enjoyed that process so much, and I was enjoying the whole idea of being engaged with something that I would forget the time, and the joy of discovery and feeling of wonder of these tiny objects, natural objects, that it felt like a reflection of, I was bringing up memories of my childhood and how it is to discover these little things. So so I made that connection, and I just kept going, and especially with COVID, it was just such a lovely practice to do, and you don't need to go far. You can just, on your way to the shops, you can get things from people's front yards or your backyard. So I continued, and as you can see, it kind of escalated, and there's a lot of pots, and that was good, because it's not only do I think that some things are much more beautiful in their accumulation, but it also speaks of obsession, so I kind of just kept going and marching it up the wall. So
I like the emphasis on this idea of taking everyday items or things that we might all see as we're walking down the street and really paying attention to them and elevating them, giving them value in this way. Yeah. Is there another work that you wanted to speak to?
Well, I guess that coming from the more traditional Wonder camera, and that one is all about regret and loss, and then the opposite side, I've done what's kind of like a forager's wall, and I've done the opposite, that's more of a celebration of nature, and it's kind of like the dichotomy that you have in museums and collections, where half of it might be nostalgia and regret, but the other half is like celebrating everyday objects and celebrating nature. So that was kind of like a bit of a yin and yang in the room. But it is, as you can see, just from that practice, this practice came, and I was using a lot more, playing with a lot more combinations of materials and products, really getting into the materiality of some of the things that I'd collected. So I'd always had a big thing for paper bark, so there's a lot of that. As you can see from some of them, you can tell which ones are from my backyard, because it'll be more edible plants. And I've interjected, I had all of this material that I really enjoyed making, and then I wanted to have something to keep you going through it. And in my walks in the park, I'd found plastic bottles, and they stand out like a sore thumb there. Yeah, terrible interruption of your time in the park. So I made some cyanotypes, and because they're also blue, and blue doesn't occur in nature naturally. So, and I just punctuated that in as something to keep your eye going along and to show that it is jarring as well on the whole natural spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful to think about that pacing as well, and think about the process of you collecting these items as you're walking through.
It's a walking meditation, that's for sure. Yeah.
Do you want to go and sit with Ben and Nopper? Okay, you're going to sit very still? Yeah, alright. Okay. Where are we up to? So we've already talked a little bit about the act of collecting, but we've noticed that this act of collecting is a thing that our audience have really connected with. We had a couple of people who came to the opening who had found the event on Eventbrite, and they were just like, oh, I like collecting, so I'm going to come along and see this exhibition about collecting. And I think it's because it sparks this curiosity in all of us, and also responds to our own compulsive behaviours, so many of us have. In your proposal to the mill, you spoke a little bit about the home-based collector museums that are scattered across the USA, and I was really drawn to that idea of thinking about, you know, going from town to town, and these people who have these overwhelming collections that they have this need to share with the public. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between your collection, which is so connected to your own biography and memory and process of, you know, your daily life, walking through the parklands, that sort of thing, and how it connects to audiences and what you think that audiences will get out of it.
Well, I think we're all collectors. We may not realise it, but we certainly have a big connection between objects, and they have a lot to offer us about our history and our identity. So just buying things for your home, you know, you're participating in that, because you don't buy the first thing that you see, you select something, and yeah, there's always, no matter how minimal people think they are, there is a collector in all of us, and there's so many reasons why people collect, and as many almost as how many different collections there are. So some of the reasons we connect with when we go and see these collections, but there's also a little bit about human achievement, which we like to celebrate. So you go and see someone who's the best sportsman, or the best painter, or the best this, and some of these collections, they're just so crazy with how much that they've obsessed over these collections that there's an element of admiration for that. And so some people collect for status, or for the thrill of the chase. They love to get something and then they don't really think about much of it afterwards. And some find a certain sense of calm and stress reduction. There's preserving, some people like to preserve nature, or they may not want to waste things and they'll collect it for a future event, or just to have something that's beautiful. And sometimes beauty is not so much in the object, but in the accumulation of a large variety of that object. So collections are something that people can admire without wanting to do the same. Yeah. Sure, I guess not everybody has space in their home to have a large collection. Yeah, there's a lot of material culture researchers who have kind of done studies on what hoarders say about their works. Hoarding is a mental health issue, but they look at that in order to try and work out what people's relationship with their objects and things in their life. So some hoarders will say, it spoke to me, or some others will say, I can't possibly waste something, and some will say, if you take it away, it's like taking away a part of my physical body, or the object speaks to me. There's all different reasons for it, and so it's interesting that objects and things, while they have an agency, people do like to reflect themselves on the object.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and obviously I think everyday people have strong connections with the objects in their lives, and that's why we have Marie Kondos to help us to understand those connections that we have, and they're important and significant to people.
Well, sometimes I think hoarding actually, I haven't done the research and I'm not an expert in material, but sometimes I feel like hoarding may be a response to a very consumerist society where you have to get more and more and more, and then you have the flip side, people telling you to dispense with it, like Marie Kondo. There's a lot of people saying, throw it out, throw it out, throw it out, and then you get this.
Finding that balance. And it's, exhibitions like this that give us the time and the space to reflect on what collecting objects mean to us. Right, next up. Going to talk about the IKEA furniture. So,
oh dear.
Your fascination with IKEA furniture is so interesting. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the attraction to IKEA, and also about how working with and about mass-produced furniture allows you to subvert the form, and then how that relates to these natural ephemeral objects that you have collected.
Right.
And maybe you can start by pointing out all of the IKEA furniture.
I think probably the main, the installation with the IKEA desk and everything. But I don't so much as have a fascination or a love of IKEA. It's more of it's a very handy, well recognisable symbol of for our culture of this a culture of throwaway society, I guess we can use that to discuss waste and how we want our things produced. Do we want something mass-produced, or do we want something a little bit that has more of a human element in it? So I've used the IKEA furniture as a tool, and the ways that I've kind of subverted the form is, first of all, you can completely flip over the functional form that it comes in and use it in a different way than what it comes. So that's an easy one. And secondly, I've always paired it with something that's really intensely handmade, or found materials, or things that aren't as schmick as the mass-produced product. So that's another way. And I've made these miniatures. It's probably the IKEA table was the first miniature that I made. So there's so much work in it, in the tiny table, and so there's kind of that contrast about how much time is involved and time and care is involved between the two products. So it's more of a commentary on waste, and I have actually, when I was in art school, I made a bonsai tree out of, I think it was 500 IKEA pencils that I'd found just lying in the car park, because I live down the road from IKEA, so I'd just go and pick up all the pencils and make them, and it's just such a waste. It's really so I've used that in different forms, and I think that IKEA likes to give the impression of being something that's natural. They have a lot of natural wood, but it's not. So I guess that's just using it.
So many things that are interesting to pull apart. I think the relationship between IKEA and the domestic space is really interesting as well, because like which one of us doesn't have IKEA furniture in our house, and you know, our values as people to maybe buy things that are made by artists or buy things that have been beautifully made or make them ourselves, versus what we can actually afford as people of this earth, living under consumerism, capitalism. It's really interesting.
Well, the other way that you can play with the throwaway nature of it is that this particular desk, which was left behind by my son in my house, has probably been used in about 3 or 4 different installations. So to keep reusing it over and over again is also another way of, you know, going against the throwaway.
Yeah. And then just thinking from a curatorial perspective, when the support of the work becomes part of the work itself, is this really interesting way of thinking about how objects sit in the space, and the way that it allows us to look at them as well. We're not seeing these tiny pots up close to our faces, or like, you know, they're not, it feels like they're further away, they're not as related to our body. Yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff there. And then this push and pull between this beautiful antique furniture on the other side of the room as well, which has been handcrafted and stood the test of time and probably has been an heirloom, or you've sought it out, versus the thing that your son left behind in your house that has now been brought into your collection and is used in this really different way. Yeah, cool. Okay, so talked a little bit already about your process of walking through the parklands. You say that with deliberate energy, each work offers an acutely focused encounter and collaboration with an environment balanced between vulnerability and resilience. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit to your consideration of nature and ecology and the complex relationship between humans and things.
It is really a complex relationship, but it could also just be simple, because I remember someone saying that any time spent with a tree is not wasted time. So I kind of like that idea. But our relationship with a lot of things, because in my honours work I did a lot of material culture study and looking at thing theory, and it's a very complex relationship, because most of the objects and things in our life we only look at in terms of their usefulness to us. So the value judgment is usually solely based on the usefulness to us, but objects have their own agency, and so I guess I'm trying to have a relationship where I'm finding their agency rather than thinking about how they're useful to me. So a lot of, if you have things that you find, just leaf litter, or if you have discarded domestic objects, then they're no longer burdened with that tag of usefulness. They're able to take on their own context and become a new object to us. So I'm playing, since I've done honours, and during my honours, I've played around a lot with that idea of bringing something into a different context. So.
Entering into that sort of affect zone where objects have the agency to affect people looking at them, other objects in the space. And I'm going off my script now, and my in-laws are probably sick of hearing about Timothy Morton. But did you study any Timothy Morton stuff in your honours as part of that? Yeah. So they have a thing, I think it comes from one of their podcasts, where they talk about the relationship in ecology between humans and animals as being strange strangers. But because I am always working in this zone where I'm thinking about objects and things, I always misremember it as being thingy things. So us as humans being thingy things, but all of these objects and artworks also being thingy things, and that we can relate to each other on this same non-hierarchical plateau as thingy things. Strange strangers, thingy things. Anyway. Alrighty.
I think children know how to do that.
Yeah. Remy was being an ant this morning. Yeah. Okay, last question. You've discussed the liminality and the tension between interior and exterior in your work, and also about childhood memories finding affinity with these found objects. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit about this, and also about what you hope audiences see in these objects, whether you think that they can find these considerations and link in with their own memories, and maybe this is the biographical things can connect to people who are in your family a bit more as well. Or,
when I thought about putting these works together, there was a lot of liminal spaces that were considered. So I was looking at the space between passion and obsession, between collecting and hoarding, or over-collecting. Hoarding is a different
category
issue.
altogether.
Over-collecting, I'll call it, and between things that are outside of the gallery, the outside landscape space and the gallery space, so crossing over that, trying to work out that liminal space. But probably the one that I was most taken with, because the whole idea of this exhibition began with the walking for the Parklands Prize. As I did that, I realised that there was, if you did that often enough and you were engaged enough, there is a space between 1 minute you're walking through the landscape and then the next minute you see something, and that will bring up all of the memories or things from your childhood, and so your head is in a different space, your body's in that space and your head's in a different space. And so whatever that thing was that made me cross over there, I would collect that and take that back to the studio and subject that to the processes of my art making. It's, I think children, as we said, they're very good at engaging with nature, and they just lose themselves in the act of discovery, and they're amazed at everything, and it's trying to capture that space again. So that's what the work, in particular the Forager's Wall, was about, and finding those stories within that space, so objects can then take on stories and through the process. So, and I guess that I was hoping that other people would connect with that feeling as well, and that they would perhaps find something that they just thought was really engaging, and they could go on that little journey with me. So,
yeah. And I think, that's an invitation to all of you to spend a little bit of time with that work and see what pulls you into that space. Yeah. And then the beautiful little thing that you were talking to your sister about before with the feathers coming from your family pets as well.
my sister was working out which bird belonged to which feathers. So they were kindly donated by some family birds.
So that's the end of my list of questions. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we haven't spoken about?
No, I think you had a very nice list.
We'll open it up to the audience then if anyone has any questions, and it can be specific or more conceptual. Or...
I guess this is the only wall that has a realistic depiction of a human figure in it. So it's got the portrait and it's got the little embroidery. I haven't outlined anything else, but why was it important that this wall had a realistic depiction as aside from any other arrangement?
I think it was a nod to the childlike aspect of the, I hate to say journey, the walk I was going the trajectory that I was going on. Yeah, so I mean that's basically me taking my inner child for a little walk, and the other one is a child who's thoroughly engaged with what they're doing.
Yeah, beautiful.
I do actually, my painting work is all portraits, so I don't know if maybe it's the other side of that, but there's not a lot of portraiture in this.
Did anyone else have anything to ask?
Because she's my sister, I know that previously she makes quilts and does a lot of stitching, different things, and I was just really interested to see how you thought you could do that on bark.
I have an affinity for paper bark. I've used it for a lot of things. It's a fantastic material, and when I wanted to sew some birds, I thought how much that bark looked like a little nest, and I could use the materiality of the paper bark to achieve something. So I actually I know that paper bark is very malleable and the needle could go through it easily, but I was a bit worried about all that paper bark in my sewing machine actually, so so I just sandwiched it between tissue paper and then I took the tissue paper off. So
So that's all machine embroidered?
it's a free machine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Better send us
Painting with stitches.
Send us a video of that. It must be incredible.
Yeah.
What kind of sewing machine do you have?
Oh, it's it's a really good sewing machine actually. It's interesting that because I know that our green spaces are really important for mental and physical health, and I think that art and creative pursuits also fills that space of filling us up. So when we had COVID and people were not able to engage in what they usually did, I tried to get my machine serviced, and it was 3 months because everybody just took up sewing and they took up all their creative passions. So
Sorry, I'm guilty.
So pull out the sewing machines and paints and everything.
Yeah, so amazing.
So none of them are hand stitched, they're all...
Just the hoops are hand stitched, and the other ones are free machine stitching. Oh, also the woven leaves are hand stitched too.
With the ceramics, even the coloured ones here and the ones that are on the little shelves, did you glaze them? Little kilns?
So,
how did you go about that? At such a small scale.
yeah, well, no one wants to put them in their kiln. So, yeah, it was a bit, but I found a miniature kiln, which is like the size of a microwave. So I bought that, and it was second hand, and it cost me $100, and I thought, because a normal kiln is thousands of dollars, so I thought, yeah, that's excellent. And I use that, and I can still fit in like 200 pots in there. And then the glazing, I didn't want to do, because I'm not, when I take something up, I often don't do the traditional way of doing things, and because they're miniatures, I don't have to comply with any of the rules of normal pottery. No one's going to have a meal out of it.
Yeah.
So I've fired them, and I have bought this glaze that you can just spray on, and it dries matte. You don't have to refire it. So that's excellent. But these this was an exercise for COVID. I wanted to see how many different colours my daughter and I could get with our nail polish collection. So they're actually, glazed with nail polish. So.
Did working at like so many different miniature scales, so like the kiln was small, the little wheel was small, everything was small, was it a different like sensation? Like, did it bring about different sort of emotional connection to pottery or ceramics?
Because I don't have to worry about, as you do with other pots, I didn't have to mass produce them in a certain way. So they kind of, what happened that day was what happened, and I didn't have to worry about structure or the normal things that you have. Yeah, I can fire because they're so small. I can fire a small log with no hole in it at all. I can fire it and it won't explode. So I don't have to worry about that. So I just made however I felt that day, and there was a lovely practice because I'd come home with my thing. I'd had a different experience that day, so the clay would just like react a little bit differently. But it is a very reasonable priced practice because because I bought one block of clay, and I've made all of this, and I've still got half of it left. So so I can keep going.
Anybody else? Happy to wrap it up. Our bar will be open in a second. We also have a matinee this afternoon. Louis, what is it?
We have the Bakers. It is sold out.
Oh, it's sold out.
But we do have Manbo after that as well.
So if anyone is interested in seeing a Fringe show this evening. Thank you to Chloe for doing our first live stream, and thank you so much, Carolyn, for having a chat today and for your exhibition. Today's the last day, so it's great that you could all make it along, and of course things are for sale. If there's anything that you want, maybe people can even take things home.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, today.
You could